36 podcast episodes reviewing 38 Godzilla films, ranking all the monster designs, talking about all the characters, the scores, and now here we are, one final episode for the Godzilla franchise. Join Chris and I as we get into our final episode, the Godzilla franchise ranking.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little township.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham and I am here along with Chris. And today we are doing our Godzilla franchise ranking. So we are going to rank all 38 films like a bunch of crazy, goofy guys. And it took us a while to come up with our list. I know for me, I've tried to do this a couple times. And every time I do it, my list shakes out a little different. So I had to put Chris through the pain of trying to get his list, which I know when you're ranking the different eras, it's not too bad. But when you try to throw all 38 together, it gets a little terrifying for 38 films.
Yeah, and I tried to use my rankings of each films within the eras as like a kind of a guideline, like is the worst of this era and how does it compare to the worst of that era, and then trying to kind of extrapolate it how they all relate to each other. I tried to science this thing out, but it who knows.
Yeah, I don't know. Chris, how are you doing what did you do your ranking off? I'm going off of, for mine, just so everybody knows, I'm going off of pure like entertainment and how much fun I have with the films. So how did you put yours together?
I kind of just went with, I mean, it's all personal preference, like just what I like the most. You have to, and I also, I consider, the ones that I think are kind of like the best overall movies, like which ones would I most likely want to show other people or that I could defend as good movies overall and not just good monster movies. And when there's these when there's like a, being on the lookout for things like the poison pills, that it's like, oh well, this is a perfectly fine movie, but it's got this really really dumb concept or this really really stupid thing about it that it might be overall a better movie than another movie, but if it doesn't fit with the series as well, that factors in too. Like, I'd kind of rather watch a not so great movie that really fits well with the franchise and flows well versus a quote unquote good movie that has this like incredibly stupid aspect to it that kind of like spoils the fun. So I considered that too, but it's tough. It's tough with 38. It's a wild and difficult task to try and say here's a subjective and objective way of me putting them worst to best, so we'll see how it shakes out.
I think we will be all right. I'll if you want me to get started, I'll go first with my number 38. My first couple I don't have a lot to say about, but once we get into it, I will definitely dig into what I like and why it's at the number it's at.
Sounds good to me.
All right, in my number 38 spot, my least favorite of the Godzilla franchise, I have Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, and it's the middle entry in the anime trilogy, and I just did not. I watched it 2 or 3 times, and even for being a Godzilla film, I can appreciate what it is, but I did not really have fun with that film, and it's a chore to get through, and there's not very many of these that are a chore to get through for me. So that is at my number 38.
Well, so far so good. That's the one I have as number 38 as well. Uh, I'm a Godzilla fan. I'm an anime fan, and I think that this movie is a disservice to both. I don't think it's a good. I don't think it's a great example of either. It is a slog to get through. It's like pulling teeth, and you know interesting ideas on paper executed in a way that is just not. It's not cool enough to be fun, and it's kind of not really smart enough to be engaging in that kind of dramatic and serious way. It kind of doesn't do any of it well. So it's at the bottom for me.
All right, at number 37, another one, Godzilla the Planet Eater, I have, which was the anime trilogy's finale film. So I again, I'm not a big anime fan. This one was a little better to get through for me, and I definitely had a little more fun with it. The different aspect and incarnation of King Ghidorah and Godzilla Earth, the final battle with them was fun. But all in all, again, just another slow film for me to get through. And like I said, I watched it 2 or 3 times for the episodes we did on it, and each time it felt like the film was getting longer.
Yeah. My number 37 actually happens to be that as well. It's a little it's a little interchangeable with maybe the remaining entry of the anime trilogy, but it's just a very bleak. It's cool stuff on paper in terms of this sort of cosmic god of King Ghidorah, but it's kind of dull, it's kind of unexciting, and it's a very sort of dark and depressing kind of a movie. Like it's just even when you get the sense that it's trying to, like, you get a bit of a happy ending in the movie, and then it kind of keeps going and just gives you like a really depressing ending, and it's so cynical and dark and just not very entertaining, and entertainment has to be entertaining. So yeah, Planet Eater gets the spot.
Absolutely. And one up from that is the start of that anime trilogy for me, which is Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. And that was clearly my favorite of the anime trilogy, as why it's above the other two. But I did like, I mean, in the first one, I liked Metphis and Haruo and some of the characters, and I liked the battle they had with Godzilla, and thinking that they killed like a smaller version of Godzilla, and then Godzilla Earth, who's 300 meters or 900 feet tall, like shows up and is just an absolute beast and like a force to be reckoned with. But again, just another movie that like I can't get into anime very much, and when there's so many other Godzilla movies that I absolutely love in this franchise, that has to be in my number 36 spot.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's a weird thing where I would say don't take the experience of not getting into these movies as, oh, anime isn't for me. It's like this isn't good anime. This isn't a good representation at all. Like I said, I'm an anime fan, and this crap ain't it. So yeah, 36 spot, Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. It's a solid enough start to the anime trilogy, but then it kind of gets worse from here. This one is the shortest one. I think it's kind of the only one of the three with like a solid pace to it and a solid structure. It kind of has a prologue which lays out like the history of the monsters attacking Earth, and then they deliberate and get back to Earth. They arrive, they encounter Godzilla, they have the strategy to destroy him. They think they destroy him, and then you whip out real Godzilla. So it actually, like, it has some sense of like momentum and energy about it that the second and third chapters just are drags. This at least isn't as much of a drag, but it's still, it in these are the bottom three for me, because collectively, it's a single, it's like a 4.5 hour ordeal. The anime trilogy is linked. It's like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You don't just watch the Two Towers. You don't just watch Return of the King. You have to watch all three. And when you have to watch all three, and they're all three the worst entries in the franchise, then it's being boring is the biggest sin when you're talking about giant monster movies. And these ultimately are just on the boring side.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Up at number 35, we get into our live action Godzilla films, and for me, the worst of them is All Monsters Attack or Godzilla's Revenge. I don't put this one on very often to watch. I put it on to watch for our episode on it for the podcast, and I mean it's very seldom that this is one I'll go back to. Ichiro, the little boy as a character, gets on my nerves. I do not like Manila in this film. I like him in other films, but this one for me, like the bank robbers story was all right, but when it comes to our live action Godzilla films, in my opinion, All Monsters Attack is the least entertaining and enjoyable for me.
Gotcha. I've got in my number 35 spot Godzilla 98. It's the ill-fated first American production of a Godzilla movie, and just too much of a departure from what Godzilla should be. It's got the fun 90s vibes. Like, whereas the bottom three, I would say these are kind of bad movies I wouldn't recommend anyone. These top 35, like, they all have their charm to some extent or another, or their entertainment value to some extent or another. And Godzilla 98, it has those 90s vibes. It's a 90s blockbuster. It's got a lot of 90s cast in it, the soundtrack, it's a good monster movie outside of the fact that it's a Godzilla movie. And as a Godzilla movie, it's just very, very bad at the way it executes Godzilla. Too much of a reinvention of the wheel with laying dozens of eggs and hundreds of eggs and running from the military and being able to be killed with conventional weaponry and just all this stuff. Like, it's just kind of this big, like, middle finger to what the characterization of Godzilla should be. So that's like, when it's a Godzilla movie and I don't really feel like the monster in the movie is Godzilla at all, you get to be one of the worst Godzilla movies.
All right, I think you'll be surprised where I actually put that one on some of these rewatches. But I'll start the controversy right away because Chris is gonna give me some crap. I'm sure I'll get some craps from from other Godzilla fans. But in my number 34 spot is Ghidorah, the three-headed monster.
Oof.
This film it drags for me. I love King Ghidorah, I love Rodan, I love Godzilla. I do not like Princess Salno in this, or like I do not like most of the characters. I don't know what it is about this film. I've tried to give this
she's
one
gorgeous and I like her a lot.
I know this isn't gonna be your 34. We're definitely not
No.
gonna match up on this one.
No.
But I don't know what it is. When I look at these films from a pure like entertainment value and like rewatchability, this is not one I go back to a lot. I can put it on here and there and enjoy it, but it's just one of those for me that it takes me a while to go back to and actually enjoy the film. So that is stuck in my number 34 spot, which I know Chris hates.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't have it as like one of the best of the series, but my God, it is. Yeah, I don't get that one. But anyways, I'll have my piece to say on that movie when I get to it. My number 34 is where I put All Monsters Attack. And the thing that causes me to slide this above G98 is with Godzilla 98, you're kind of wasting 2 hours and 20 minutes of your time, and you're getting a Godzilla that doesn't really feel like Godzilla. At least with All Monsters Attack, with the credits, it's like a 69-minute movie. It's this children's adventure kind of a thing. It's this fantasy that's all in the little boy's head a little bit. So it's kind of operating on another level. It's sort of a kid daydreaming about Godzilla. So it has this sort of innocence to it. Someone once said that the mistake is that they made a a Godzilla movie that was made for 6-year-olds when most of them are made for 10-year-olds. So it and but it's got a charm to it. It's got a fun to it, and in worst case scenario, it's got a lot of stock footage of monster battles from other Godzilla movies, and those are entertaining to watch. So it's a clip show movie, but it's charming, and it's an easy watch to get through.
Absolutely. I agree with you on those. My number 33, I have Ebra, Horror of the Deep. I actually enjoyed this film on my rewatch, but it's just how cheesy Godzilla and Ebra are for me. I love it, but it kind of weighs the film down for me. I do like the characters. I like Captain Yamoto, and I like the Red Bamboo and all them. But when it comes to Godzilla films, I mean, there's just so much better in the franchise. So I stuck that in my number 33 spot.
Alrighty then. For my number 33 spot, you're gonna hate me for this one. So my number 33 spot, I've got Godzilla versus Megalon, and this is sort of the kind of chintziest, cheesiest example of the 70s Godzilla movies where the time was short and the budget was shorter and the stock footage was high and the production value was low, and there was all these industrial circumstances to why the movie had all these limitations and challenges. And this is one of those Godzilla movies where it's like you have to enjoy it on that it's kind of so bad it's good kind of a way. Like, it's hard to defend this as a movie, but you can make fun of it as a movie in a little bit and have fun with it. And so Godzilla versus Megalon's my number 30.
All right, kind of disappointing. I like that one, but when it comes all in all, it's not a very well made film, so I understand that positioning. Oh, number 32. We haven't even dug into a third yet. I have Godzilla Raids Again, and I really like Godzilla Raids Again on our most recent rewatches for the podcast. And it's just I think it's just the black and white. It's like a historical film in the franchise. Godzilla fights his first battle against Anguirus. Tsukioka is a good character. I like that they brought back Dr. Yamane, and I like the fight scenes and stuff. It's just again, a lot of these in the bottom are just not ones I go back to rewatch a lot when I want to watch a Godzilla film. So in ranking these, like I said, I do them out of how much I enjoy watching the film and how often I feel I can rewatch it and have a good time with it. And Godzilla Raids Again is an absolute classic in the franchise. If I was going off of importance to the franchise, this would be probably in the top 10. But out of enjoyment, I got it at my number 32 spot.
Gotcha. My 32 would be Godzilla versus King Ghidorah in 1991. It's there's so many things about it that are good. The monster action, the Akira Ifukube music, the fights, the Godzilla World War II origin. I just cannot stand the time travel aspect of the movie, and I really, really hate the android from the future. Everything about him is horrible special effects, and everything about the Futurians, it's bad future technology that just feels very sort of cheap and chintzy, and it just feels borderline a made for TV kind of a movie, production value wise. And so for everything it does cool, it has these horrible baseline things that it does really, really bad, and just kind of it is just nowhere near on the level of all the other Heisei Godzilla movies. And so this might be a hot take, but man, I cannot stand the plot of Godzilla versus King Ghidorah in 91.
All right, what we got? Number 31. This might be controversial to some fans, but I have Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. Megaguirus. This film is one that just drags for me. I love the Godzilla suit design, how they kept it pretty much to the Godzilla 2000 design. Sugimori is a character you can follow and kind of root for, but when it comes to the film and like the plot of the black hole. I'm not a huge fan of that whatsoever. Like I said, the monster action is great, but there's very few characters in this film that I like and like can follow. And it's a slog for me. It's an hour and 45 minutes long. We get some good Godzilla action, but this is not one that I have a lot of fun with unless Godzilla's on the screen. So that is at my number 31.
The stars align again. My number 31 spot is also Godzilla versus Megaguirus. Uh, I echo what you say, and yeah, for me, the kind of poison pill for this one is the absolute idiocy of a black hole cannon that they're going to be firing on the planet Earth. Like it's just one of those things. It's like by the even in a giant monster movie that's a sci-fi movie, like the whole top to bottom of that concept of okay, we have the ability to launch a black hole that's gonna go away after a certain fixed amount of time or be miniaturized to the point where it's isolated to like a very small space. But so we've got a cannon that we can launch this from. We can create this, and then we're just going to be firing it randomly at the planet to try and destroy monsters. And it somehow creates wormholes to other dimensions that these dragonfly creatures come through. And again, it's got a great final kaiju battle, but the plot and the characterization of this is just tore up from the floor up. And the whole thing is sort of remade with all of with so many better attributes and none of the bad attributes a few years later when they get to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. But Godzilla versus Megaguirus is like the prototype. It's like the dry run, and it just feels very sort of amateurish.
Yeah, for sure. So here's where I put Godzilla 1998 in my number 30 spot. There's just some films on my rewatches of this. I did like Dr. Nico Tatopoulos. I didn't really care for Audrey in this film. I liked Philippe. Animal was a good character. Of course, Godzilla's design isn't my favorite. It's something different. So what I went into this film, I shut my brain off and I was like, this is not the Japanese Godzilla. This is the first incarnation of an American Godzilla that they tried to do different. They went off the success of Jurassic Park and tried to make the little Godzillas kind of like raptor-ish. So like they were trying to hit the big payload with kind of ripping off a little bit of Jurassic Park. So that's how I look at this film. So I have a blast with it when I watch it, when I think of it in that aspect and not as like a pure Godzilla film. So that's why it's in my number 30 spot.
Gotcha. My number 30 spot goes to Godzilla versus Hedorah, and it does some some cool things, and it's got this like psychedelic vibe to it, but a lot of it just feels very kind of like you want to talk about a slog to get through. It just there's this big final battle with Godzilla where Godzilla gets a ton of screen time, but everything about this movie is just like dark and grimy and sludgy, and it just is like it creates this kind of like not pleasant experience to watch and look at this movie. Like it's just kind of like ugly visually, and so it's just a drag to kind of sit down and watch, and then you throw on it does some cool things and some nice things, but and Hedorah is a great monster. But again, it's just this kind of weirdly sort of edited with this weird kind of style, and Godzilla flying, while it's a meme and it's kind of iconic and infamous and whatever, it's also kind of like really dumb. And so that's like the poison pill for this one. It's like, why you gotta have Godzilla fly in this ridiculous way? So so Godzilla versus Hedorah gets my 30 spot.
All right, number 29 for me. Here we go with another controversial one is Destroy All Monsters. And I absolutely love the ending battle where they just all the monsters just gang up and give Ghidorah what he deserves. But the one thing that has driven this movie all the way to the bottom, pretty much where it is at 29, is the Kilaaks. I find them to be like the worst alien race in the Godzilla franchise. I cannot stand them. I love everything else about this movie but them, and they bring it all the way down to 29 for me.
And alrighty. My number 29 is Ebra Horror of the Deep. It's got a lot of nostalgia for me, and it's fun, but you know it is essentially a King Kong movie with search and replace done on the script, and Godzilla dropped into it. It's Godzilla doing a King Kong movie, an island adventure. He kind of gets distracted by a beautiful lady. He's doing a lot of hand to hand fighting. He's not really firing his breath a lot. So this is the one that's kind of the first major departure from films kind of directed in the Ishiro Honda style and in that kind of early Showa energy. This is the first one that feels off brand. Even the Mothra fairies in this one are not the Peanuts. So it just feels like this kind of Godzilla movie. This like alternate presentation, and it as a first attempt from director Jun Fukuda, he's not dialed in yet. And so this one is just kind of, it has its moments, it has its fun, but not a lot of it.
All right, so Ebera's gone from both of our lists. 28. At 28, I have Son of Godzilla, and I like this film a lot, actually. So I mean, it goes to show how much the ones above it I like. And I like Psycho in this. I like Goromaki as the reporter. I like all the new monsters. This is one of the films that I do actually like Minya or Manila in. And I do not like Godzilla's design in this. I believe we said this was like the frog look where in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's not a good look for me. I'm not a fan. Of course, I still love Godzilla. I love Kamacuras and Kumonga and all the monsters we get in this, and I have a good time with like the doctors trying to do like the weather experiments and stuff. But there's better films in the franchise, so that's why this is down there at 28.
Gotcha. My 28 is Invasion of Astro Monster, and yeah,
my heart.
I know that's a stab for you. The sort of complaints that you have about Ghidorah is how I feel about this one. This one is a perpetual it just feels like such a long and kind of boring movie. I like Glenn and Fuji. The human characters are interesting, and they've got some cool stuff going on, and but this one is just it feels like it's a movie that's so much more about the Planet X aliens and these X aliens and this whole thing, and the monsters just feel like such an afterthought, and they feel like they're barely in the movie. And I want my Godzilla movies to kind of be a bit more about Godzilla, not about all of this human stuff going on, even when that's kind of interesting. Like the balance must be struck, and the balance doesn't feel struck here. And Kumi Mizuno is gorgeous, but that doesn't make a whole movie automatically great. And this was kind of the first time Godzilla got a little silly with the dance that he does on Planet X, and it kind of set a bad precedent. So it's in my 28 spot.
All right. I'll give you a free pass on it. I'll give you one. I'll get into that one eventually.
Mm-hmm.
In number 27, I take our first visit to the Heisei era with Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and I just think there's too much going on in this film. I love Godzilla in this. Space Godzilla is awesome. Mogera is even a nice addition instead of having like a Mecha Godzilla. We get another Mecha character in Mogera. Miki Sagusa is always a welcome sight. Yuki is a phenomenal character in this film. He's probably easily one of the best top two characters in the film. but it's just all the side plots with like the kidnapping and the telepathy that they're doing. I just think it's too much for an hour and 45-minute Godzilla film. I think we could have trimmed this down to like a 85, 90, 92-minute really good Godzilla film, and all the side plots just kind of drag for me. So I have Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla at number 27.
Gotcha. My number 27 is Godzilla Final Wars, and you bring up an interesting thing of a movie that's got too much going on. Final Wars is a fun movie to watch. Like, I guess if you're like stricken with ADHD or something, or you have TikTok brain, I don't know. There's a lot going on in this movie, and that you've got martial arts mutants and alien invaders and mind controlled monsters and everything that from like a cool early 2000s 90s sci-fi movie to the chintzy cheesy 70s Godzilla movies. It's a weird, and for Godzilla's 50th anniversary movie, it's not as sort of epic and serious as I would have wanted it to be. For 10 years this was the last note the franchise had, and they went out with a movie that felt like it set the franchise back 3 decades. It's just weird. There's just too much going on. There's a lot going on. Like, I'm all for watching humans get into martial arts fights, but I don't want most of the action in my epic Godzilla movie to be humans in martial arts fights. I kind of want more of a front and center focus on the monsters and the monster action in this type of movie. So it's a fun one. It's got a cool soundtrack. It's got a lot of really cool things that it does, but it's a miscalculation in my opinion.
All right. Very well said. At my number 26 is a film that I just seen at G-Fest, actually, and had a really good time with it, and that is The Return of Godzilla. And I know it's a little low. Like I said, I love most of these Godzilla films so much that it's hard to put this one this low. But I I liked the characters, but I wasn't really rooting for anyone. I was almost, it was Godzilla's big triumphant return, so I was rooting for Godzilla to open up a can, destroy everything in front of him and stuff. I like the Godzilla redesign in this and our first introduction film to the Heisei era, but there's a lot more in the Heisei era that I enjoyed more, and the Millennium era, and there's still so many films left after that one in this franchise that I have this one at number 26, even though I do really enjoy this film, The Return of Godzilla.
Nice. I for my 26, I put Son of Godzilla. The concept is kind of hokey. I'm not really a big fan of Godzilla sort of fathering an offspring and having, father-son time. It's a little goofy, it's a little childish, but the interesting and cool things that it does do is there's extended sequences focusing on the monsters with no dialogue. That's always nice to see. I like this is a case where, unlike Ibra Horror of the Deep, I like the isolated island setting of this movie. I like Kumanga and Kamacuras as monsters. It has these redeeming qualities. Like, this is a step up for the sort of Godzilla on an island concept, and it's not great, but it has its charm. And I don't love the sun concept, but it has its moments.
All right. There are a couple moments and rankings in my list where I feel like I'm going to get some slander for, and some hate comments, which bring them on. I love to hear other Godzilla fans' opinions, but at number 25, I have Shin Godzilla.
Oof, buddy. Oof,
every time I watch this film, the government and all that stuff, the office stuff, it just drags out the film for me. I absolutely adore Godzilla's look in this, how he evolves into different forms and his new heat ray and everything about it. I love anytime Godzilla's on screen, I'm locked into this film. I'm keyed in. And then they start going over like the government and the plans to get rid of Godzilla. and being in the office and like how quickly like we jump around from person to person, here to here, there to there. It kind of gets annoying for me. Like it drives me a little nuts. So I do rewatch this film a lot. Like I'll put it on a lot during before NFL Sundays for an hour or two while I pick up the house in the background or something. I do truly like this film, but it uh, Godzilla couldn't save it for me, so I have it at number 25.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My number 25, I've got Godzilla versus Gigan. This is a movie that it's plagued with some stock footage and a few of the signs of the cheapness settling in of the climate of the 70s, where they were running out of time, running out of money, not able to make these films the way they used to make them. But this one isn't hindered nearly as bad as a film like Godzilla versus Megalon. This one uses some stock footage, but it also has a pretty ample amount of new footage, and Gigan is a really cool looking monster. And the big tag team fight at the end with Godzilla and Anguirus versus Gigan and King Ghidorah is a really great climax that's staged in a really cool way. This movie gets a little bloody. There's a little bit of some blood spurting going on in this movie, which is an interesting new wrinkle for the films at this time. The English dub has the infamous, Godzilla and Anguirus talking English to each other, which is just a great meme. There's, it's just one of those movies where the fun of it and the charm of it overcomes a lot of the pitfalls, like the stock footage or the recycled plot of alien invaders and things like that. So it's kind of like right here, kind of like lower middle of the pack, but
That is all right. A fun film that I will get into a little later. For my number 24, for my Kobe Bryant ranking, we have Godzilla vs. Hedorah. And I I like this film. I like Hedra's design. There's very few things that kill this film for me. One of them is kind of the soundtrack. The soundtrack kind of takes me out. It's a little different. We don't get a lot of Godzilla's like original themes or anything like that. It's a little out there. I like the pollution message that we kind of need to start taking care of our earth and our homes and stuff like that. But of course, it's like a middle of the pack film for me. I can put it on and have some fun because of Godzilla and Hedorah, but I have it as number 24 because clearly there's a lot more fun to be had in this franchise.
I can understand that. For my number 24, I've got Godzilla Raids Again, which is, I'm wagering, a lot higher than many would place this movie. I see so many people put it so close to the bottom, and I guess I understand it. But I think it just gets a negative rap. I think it's this like reinforcing thing where people say it's bad, so then people agree that it's bad, and it's so easy to overlook it from the how good the original is, and then the next movie after it was much more of an iconic and definitive movie. So this one's just kind of there in between. But I think it. I appreciate it for kind of matching the overall kind of more grounded 50s serious tone of the 54 movie. There's no super weapons in this movie. It doesn't get very sci-fi. They don't go for a satirical or comedic or silly aspect to it. Like, they're still playing the monsters pretty straight, pretty serious. It's executed much more sloppily than the first film, but I think it's kind of, I love it for being that kind of conventional 50s Godzilla movie. It's a lesser repetition of the first movie, a far lesser version, but it's up that alley, and so I appreciate it for that, even though it's still got a lot of flaws, and the pace isn't so great. But it's the debut of Anguirus and the debut of Godzilla fighting another monster, so it's significant and interesting in those ways.
Absolutely. Even though I had it a little lower, I think I had it at like 32. All in all, it's a good and fun film. So I'm glad you had it a little higher. At number 23, I have Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth. I I like Mothra. I have fun with this film. This is just when it comes to the Godzilla franchise, I have more fun with other films. I did like the Ando character. I liked of course, Mickey. I like the banter between Takuya and his wife, Masako. So I mean, there were good parts of this film. The Godzilla design, it's the typical Heisei era Godzilla, and I always liked that. Batra was a welcome sight for a new monster. I hope someday, with Mothra being in the Monsterverse, maybe we can get Batra in there as well. But like I said, I have fun with all these films, but I have Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth in my number 23 spot.
We get another stars aligning moment, as that's where I have Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth. And so I echo a lot of what you say. There's I like the the 90s upgrade to Mothra. Batra is a good counterpoint to Mothra. Akira Ifukube delivers a great score. I love hearing the new sort of 90s upgrade of the Mothra song. It just feels a little, this is the first film that Okawara, the director, directed. This is his first time directing a Godzilla movie, so you feel a little bit of that. I don't like to use words like amateurish, but it's that sort of the first Godzilla film a lot of directors direct is not usually their best. It kind of has a clunkiness. It kind of has a less polished feel to it. So this one's a bit rough around the edges, and so Godzilla Mothra: The Battle for Earth, or Godzilla versus Mothra, the Japanese title, that it falls in my 23 spot as well.
All right, 22, a film you already did. I have Godzilla vs. Megalon. This one's a little higher up. I love Jet Jaguar, man. Jet Jaguar and Megalon, and then you bring Gigan back. I know there's quite a bit of stock footage in this film, but I like the trio of the guy characters we get, and it's just it's a lot of fun. We wait about 50 minutes or so to see Godzilla. But once we get Godzilla and Jet Jaguar,
about 70 minutes into an 85-minute movie.
Once we get them, the tag team matchup in this film, like from there on out, I absolutely have a blast. And like I said, I love all the monsters in this, and it made me put it a little higher. So I got Godzilla vs. Megalon in my 22 spot.
Nice. I have no shortage of love for Jet Jaguar, so I'm glad. I'm okay with you ranking him a little higher. So my number 22 spot, I actually have Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. Notoriously a lot of people's least favorite Heisei movie. When we were doing the rewatches, I just found myself kind of, and maybe it's one of those things where I have a soft spot for the movies that feel overhated, but I don't know. I was just kind of digging it. It does have a lot going on, like you say. The criticisms you threw at it aren't inaccurate, but I think Space Godzilla is a cool, unique villain. Little Godzilla in this movie is an infinitely better design than Minya, and is very cute. I like the sort of history that they tie into it, and playing up the continuity that Space Godzilla is maybe from the cells of Godzilla that Mothra took into space, or from the Biollante cells that went into space. And I like that there's this sort of revenge aspect of characters from a character who died in Godzilla versus Biollante. I like that they're kind of, taking opportunities to tie it together. And Mogera is not quite as cool as Mechagodzilla, but it's a good, gives a lot of good mech action. And Space Godzilla is very intimidating, and I just dig it. It's a fun, it's undersold, I think, as a good standard issue 90s Godzilla movie.
Absolutely. See, this is why I wanted to do all 38, because you're going to say things about films that I'm not. So it's nice to get two different perspectives.
Definitely.
All right, in my number 21 spot, I have Godzilla Tokyo SOS. And I just, when it comes to the Millennium series, like how we ranked these, this was kind of my middle of the pack. So when it comes to a Godzilla film, I always welcome Mothra back. She's always a welcome sight. Um, Kiryu is also a bomb ass Mechagodzilla design. I mean, not everyone would agree with me, but I like Mechagodzilla's design in this one and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. But this is one of the films that, I said like the anime trilogy drags for me. This is a film that is a slow burner for me. But we get into the monster action like 40 minutes into the movie, 35 minutes into the movie, and it's constant monster action and back to the humans, for the last 50 minutes of the movie. So it's insane for me to feel like the movie kind of drags, but it's not, or like the fight scenes aren't very exciting for me. It's a lot of like beam shows and stuff like that. Like I don't see a lot of, you know, getting in close and clobbering each other. But I do like Mothra's demise in this film. I like that we get the fairies back. I like that they make a connection with the original Mothra film with Professor Chujo. And it just, I have fun with it, but it's not one of my favorites. So I have it in my 21 spot.
Gotcha. In my 21 spot, I have a different Mechagodzilla movie. I have Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 from 1993. And it has a dumb title because it's not a sequel to any other Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla movie. And I don't like that it has tie-in connections to Mecha King Ghidorah and the stupid time travel stuff. But overall, it's got a great Akira Ifukube score. It's got a cool Mechagodzilla design. It's got a ton of Godzilla screen time. It's got a lot of great kaiju action in it, and a lot of eye candy, and the debut of Godzilla using his super atomic breath, the red. And so it's got a lot of cool things to like about it. It's got a few of those little things that are kind of annoying and kind of irksome, but they're not big enough that they bring the whole thing down. I love kind of all like getting the full on exploration of G-force in this film. And so it's a great time. You get a 90s upgrade of Rodan, which is quite cool. You get fire Rodan because everyone gets a beam in the 90s, and the birth of Little Godzilla. It's a good time.
Absolutely. I will get to that one here eventually as well. But right above Godzilla Tokyo SOS is the previous film to that, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. And this is the one that I can have fun with. We get the updated Mechagodzilla design for the first time. I like that they kept Godzilla with the big dorsal plates or dorsal spikes on his back. I like that they went to like a more like bonish, like grayish silver color for those. This is the one that I talk about where I say like we get some fights like they got some rock'em sock'em robots. They're in close punching each other and biting and headbutting and clawing, and I have fun with this film for sure. And even the characters like the professor who's trying to like make his little like love connection with Akane, and then his daughter Sarah and stuff like that I can have fun with them. But all in all, like it's a middle of the pack film for me, but I will definitely put it on here and there to watch, and it's in my number 20 spot out of the 38.
Nice. Breaking into my top 20, I've actually have Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. For me, this one is kind of just like a peak representation of that early Showa 60s kind of Godzilla vibes, where they were still fairly serious, but getting a bit more adventurous with the plot line. You have monsters getting their dialogue translated by the fairies. You have monsters actively teaming up to take on Ghidorah. It's kind of threading that needle of, is this getting silly? Is this not? But it's just so well. It's just also irresistibly fun, and so Akira Ifukube given an amazing score. This is the debut of King Ghidorah, and the first real multiple monster clash in these films that wasn't just one monster versus another monster. You get a 4 monster mash here. And so, I do like the characters here. I like Princess Sauno, and I like we've got the reporter and the police officer, and that whole element of it. There's some shootouts and fist fights and things of that nature in this movie that keep the energy high. It's an engaging human plot line that's not overbearing and over focused on, and so I like this one. I put it in my top 20.
All right. We are halfway through with this one right here. And Chris, doing this podcast and the rewatch of this film to do our episode on it, and then seeing this one at G Fest, put this film quite a bit up on my list. This film was considerably lower, but at number 19, I have Godzilla Final Wars. I used to not so much despise this movie, but I was not a fan whatsoever. I loved all the monster action, but anything else I couldn't stand. But after my last couple rewatches of it, I've just learned to have fun with it, especially at G Fest with all the fans and stuff, like rocking along with you and cheering and having a good time. That was a blast. And then Don Fry, he's got some memorable, awesome lines in this film, and the Godzilla design is awesome. Bringing back all the monsters for the 50th anniversary, and just to have like a cheesy, like 70s, like Showa era blast like that. This was probably in my like 30s originally for rankings, and my last couple rewatches have brought it all the way up to the number 19. I just have a good time with it.
Yeah, it never hurts to have the Japanese Godzilla kill the American Godzilla set to some Sum 41,
Absolutely.
So my number 19, it's the kind of the flip side of that coin. My number 19 is actually Destroy All Monsters. I kind of consider it in the way that there are some of these Godzilla movies that are borderline in plot line, sort of borderline remakes of other ones. This is very much the plot of Invasion of Astro Monster, but it's just kind of an inversion. Whereas Astro Monster has the much more compelling human plot line and human storyline, but really, really underwhelming monster action and monster attention. This film has a much less compelling human plot line and human cast, but a much more extravagant showcase of the monsters, both in the roster and the scope and scale of the action scenes that they're associated with. And so for me, like, well, if you're going to have one or the other, I think a Godzilla movie is better served with if they've got the same plot, the movie with the much better monster action and monster roster is the much better monster movie. And, I love the big team up finale. I love that this is the film where they seemingly finally kill King Ghidorah for good. There's just, again, it goes without saying, Akira Ifukube destroying it on the score, Ishiro Honda destroying it with the direction. This is, the human plot's a little thin, but the aliens aren't as interesting as the Planet X aliens, but the overall scope and scale of it is so huge and so wild and so entertaining. It's so extravagant that I've got to have this one in my top 20 at number 19.
All right. No judgments made here. I've made some pretty critical assessments here. So in my number 18 spot, I probably have what is Jun Fukuda's most well put together film, but not my favorite of his. So I have Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, the 1974 film, in my number 18 spot. And I absolutely enjoy King Caesar. I love that they brought Anguirus back for a cameo, and that I'm not a fan of him getting wrecked by Mechagodzilla, but you know what? We have to show that this guy's a force to be reckoned with, and they definitely did there. The Black Hole Planet 3 aliens, I don't mind them at all. They help me enjoy the film. They help keep it moving. And I love that we get a mecha character, and he's probably in his most triumphant design. It's phenomenal in this 74 film and the film that followed this. But again, this is a film that I wasn't that high on until I rewatched it a couple times, and this was another one I seen at G Fest. And again, with the fans, it was just an absolute blast seeing this with all the fans. And it made it go up on my list a little bit. So I at number 18, I have Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla.
The stars align yet again. I also have Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 74 as my number 18 spot, and it is my highest rated Jun Fukuda film, and I love it. 18 doesn't feel high enough for me in some ways, but it is quite high on the list, and I love this movie to death. Great Mechagodzilla design. Great score by I think it's Masaru Sato. Uh, Mechagodzilla gets a banger musical theme in this movie. The violence is high, the bloodshed is high. You have Anguirus getting wrecked. You have Godzilla powering up in the rain and turning himself into a magnet. King Caesar's this crazy shaggy boy that teams up with Godzilla. Like, this movie just has so much fun to it and so much of a good sense of pace and structure about it. And it's just it threads that needle where it's like there's bad 70s Godzilla, and then there's kind of great 70s Godzilla, and this is kind of one of those. It's like this is I think one of the finer examples of 70s Godzilla.
Absolutely. I didn't think we were gonna align anymore here, but maybe we got a couple more coming up that will the stars will align in the same spot for us. Who knows?
We shall see.
In my number 17 spot, I have the start to the Monsterverse in Godzilla 2014, and the only thing that holds this film back for me is the many times that we cut away from Godzilla and the monsters fighting. I I do not have a problem with any of the characters in this. Elizabeth Olsen as Elle Brody, Bryan Cranston's character Joe, and Ken Watanabe as Ishiro Serizawa. And this film is loaded with good characters. It's literally just that all the cutting away that we do is as soon as Godzilla comes on screen, we cut away. All right, the male Muto is flying in to fight Godzilla. The doors close and we cut away. And it just, that drives me insane. But to bring back Godzilla for another American incarnation, this was an absolute blast of a start, and I have it at my number 17 spot.
Nice. For my number 17, I've got Terror of Mechagodzilla, the other Mechagodzilla movie from the 70s, the other great example of 70s Godzilla, this time directed by Ishiro Honda and with Akira Fukube back on the score. And somehow Mechagodzilla gets two 70s Godzilla movies and two absolute banger theme songs in a row. I don't know what it is about Mechagodzilla, but he commands great theme songs. And this one is a little more serious than Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but I don't think it loses any of its punch. It's got a bit more, it's a little bit less of that sort of fun wild ride, but it is still thoroughly entertaining. It's got a stronger, more emotional human core plot that's tied quite strongly in an inventive way to Mechagodzilla. And it closes the Showa era out in a way that's got quite a bit of merit to it, and so I'll always like Terror of Mechagodzilla at my number 17 spot.
Well, your number 17 is my number 16. I have Terror of Mechagodzilla in my number 16 spot, and I like Titanosaurus. Like you said, Ishiro Honda comes back, and just for what I think, he delivers a banger for us, and I love the music of this film. I love that we brought Mechagodzilla back, and I think it's a good ending to the Showa era for what we got. And it's just a film I can put on and have fun with. We usually don't see the 2-on-1 against Godzilla. We usually see a monster that Godzilla needs help battling, so he ends up getting the help. But I like that he takes the 2-on-1 and just overcomes it like a champ. So Terra Mechagodzilla is my number 16.
Yeah, and it's a great inversion. The last film was Godzilla and another monster teaming up against Mechagodzilla, and then it's Mechagodzilla and another monster against Godzilla. And he gets a great entrance in Terror of Mechagodzilla as well. Um, my number 16 is King Kong versus Godzilla, 1962. The first sort of big crossover movie, the first sort of big monster versus monster. They go a little bit satirical and lighthearted with the tone, but it's an epic, iconic clash of the Titans, and there's not much to be said about it. Akira Ifukube, great on the score. Honda, great on the direction. It sets the blueprint for the entire Showa era in terms of structure and how you do these movies. After this movie, Godzilla was a franchise for Toho, and they were not going to stop forever, basically. And so this one was my most watched one as a kid. I can't remember the first time I saw it because I feel like I always had memories of knowing what it was. So I love this one to death. King Kong versus Godzilla is just, good fun.
I honestly thought that would be higher on your list.
It almost was, but there's just some other ones that I just like in other ways.
Well, for number 15, I have Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. And this is one of the ones for the Heisei era that's a little higher up for me. And it's just all the monster action we get in this. We get Miki Sagusa back, and I mean, she doesn't really do a lot in the film. She's not front and center yet, but it's always a pleasant, like, surprise to have her back. It's always nice. And Professor Kazuma Aoki, he's fun, he's a like little monster dinosaur nerd and stuff like that. Godzilla's design is great. Like you said, the Mechagodzilla design in this is probably the most handsome Mechagodzilla design, or most proper. So I like this film. That we get Fire Rodan, which again, like you said, everyone in the 90s has to have a beam, including like Mothra and Batra, and it's we got beam fights in all of these films. And this is just an entertaining one. I always welcome having Mechagodzilla back, and I stuck it in my number 15 spot.
Nice. My number 15 is the original Mothra versus Godzilla. I think it's a great, it feeds right off of the design, the layout put forth by King Kong versus Godzilla, and it I don't know, it's that peak 60s Showa era. Mothra and the fairies are brought in a unique and interesting way. Godzilla has a good design. The monster scenes are well spaced out. The structure of it's really good. Just really good fundamentals. And the characters are super compelling and interesting and charming. And sets the tried and true tradition of Mothra getting roasted and dying in these movies. And so this is the originator of the trope, and so you just gotta respect it, gotta love it. Fantastic musical score, just firing on all cylinders.
Absolutely. So I know we're not going to match up here on this one, because in my number 14 spot, I have Godzilla vs. Gigan. I got her high up there.
That's okay. It's got that fun factor.
It does. I absolutely, even though the suits in this film are kind of falling apart, the budgets, they weren't getting the money they used to for these films. But I like Godzilla. I like Anguirus. We get a tag team battle with them two against Gigan and King Ghidorah. And I like the aliens in this film. They're a little funky. They turn into cockroaches at the end and whatnot. But for the fight scenes, for the half hour that we get them, and that Godzilla's just getting tortured by the Godzilla Tower and Gigan busting him open. This is just an all-out brawl at the end of this film, and these final fights in this. And I just have a blast with this. This is one of the ones that I would always put on when I was a kid. Out of the Godzilla franchise, this might be the one I've watched the most because of watching it so much when I was a kid. So I had to put it up here somewhere because I still enjoy it to this day. So Godzilla vs. Gigan is in my number 14 spot.
Nice. My number 14 spot, actually quite a bit higher than you had this film, is The Return of Godzilla. Uh, I don't like that it doesn't use the classic Ifukube themes for Godzilla. I feel like making a direct sequel to the 54 movie should have warranted that. But outside of that, I think when you take it as a sequel to the original 54 film, I think it's kind of exceptional because it kind of keeps that grounded tone. It gives us a solo Godzilla movie. It's got that sort of 80s sci-fi energy to it with the Super X. Uh, Compared to something like Godzilla Raids Again, this is a much stronger sequel to the original film. It started the Heisei series and sort of rebirthed the franchise into the, at the time, modern era. You know, it wiped the slate clean of all of the nonsense that had come since the original. Maybe it would have been better served to be a 100% reboot, but it's still very cool as a legacy sequel, as they say. And I just, I'm really high on this movie. It's that, like, really, there's not a lot of Godzilla movies that take the approach of being fairly grounded, focused kind of mostly on Godzilla versus the military. So when you get one that's done well, I appreciate it. And I always like it when there's inventive non-super weapon ways of taking out Godzilla.
All right. Well, I'm scared for my next ranking here because one of these is going to be absolute blasphemy, and I'm gonna get some hate mail for this one. If I was doing my list off of like pure like entertainment history and it like importance of a film, this would absolutely be number one. But in my number 13 spot, I have the original 54 Godzilla.
Mm. Mm.
I know.
So
I
this is how.
absolutely.
So this is how it ends, huh?
I am not a credible podcaster anymore.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love this film. And, Ogata and Professor Yamane and Dr. Serizawa and Emiko and everything about this film, from the directing to the music to the characters to Godzilla, this is a phenomenal film. And I mean, its historical value is like second to none when it comes to a monster movie, but that's not what I'm doing my rankings off of. That's why I keep saying that I'm doing them off my entertainment value. I love watching this movie. Before my most recent couple rewatches, when my first watch of the original 54, this was still ranked in the 20s for me. I think it was like number 27. And I watched it two more times before I did my rankings. And I was like, this film is just too good. There's too much historical value for it. The Godzilla suit design for being 70 years old is just amazing. And the special effects they did. But I just enjoy and I have more fun with other films. So that's the only reason this is at number 13. Like I said, if it was just going off like history and the importance of a film in cinema history, this would be number one, no doubt. But for my enjoyment, I have the original 54 at number 13.
Gotcha. You're canceled. My number 13 is Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. For me, it's director Masaki Tezuka coming back for his second crack at the Godzilla franchise after Megaguirus. Megaguirus was sort of clunky and kind of amateurish and kind of slow paced, and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla is almost the same exact thing. You've got the female protagonist who is part of a military team who fights Godzilla in the prologue, and her team gets killed, and so then she harbors regret and survivor's guilt and wants revenge on Godzilla. And they have a super weapon with some kind of cannon, only it's an absolute zero cannon, which makes infinitely more sense than a black hole gun, and it's attached to a Mechagodzilla with an awesome design, so that's always a bonus. We get great Mechagodzilla versus Godzilla fights. The scientist who has a crush on the female protagonist is much more interesting because he's got a daughter whom he's looking for like a mother for, and he's trying to take care of, so he's not just some twerpy creep. just everything about it. It's like Godzilla versus Megaguirus, but done in a much better or more effective or more efficient way. And the pacing and structure of this movie is better. The theme is great. It's one of my favorite sort of non-Ifukube Godzilla themes. And the protagonist Akane is compelling and attractive also. And yeah, I just I like this movie tried to lay out a sort of new timeline where the original Godzilla and the original Mothra occurred in the history of this movie, and it kind of tried to set up something new that wasn't just a total one-off. So I like this movie a lot.
Absolutely. No punches pulled there. I'll give you that one. I enjoyed as well. So I'm glad you ranked it a little higher. My number 12 spot, I have King Kong versus Godzilla from 1962. My two favorite giant monsters duking it out. I absolutely enjoy Mr. Taco, and I can watch this movie and have a fun time and get a couple laughs in while still enjoying some monster battles. Still, got them considering King Kong won in this and Godzilla lost. It almost went a little lower, but it's too much fun to be had. That for me, it's at number 12, and I enjoy watching this every time I put it on.
Nice. My number 12 is Tokyo SOS, which goes hand in hand with Against Mechagodzilla, but to me, it's the other half of that coin, and it kind of completes the quadrilogy. You have got the original Godzilla, the original Mothra, and then you have Against Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS, bringing it kind of full circle. I love that this is kind of a short, sweet movie. I love that the whole second half is just this massive monster mash. I like that you get Mothra and Mechagodzilla in the mix together. It's everything I like about Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, but also continue to just kind of be improved upon and done better and bigger. And it's just it's firing on all cylinders for me. So it's my number 12 spot.
All right. And my number 11 spot, we have the longest title in the Godzilla franchise, which is Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, or what fans have praised it as is GMK for short. And this film's an absolute blast. The score is phenomenal. The characters in Yuri and her father are awesome. Godzilla being an absolute force of nature to where he takes on three guardian monsters in this, Baragon, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, is also fun. And in this, he's larger than all of them. He's made to be an imposing force, and I have an absolute blast when I put this on.
The stars align once again because my 11th spot is also GMK, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack.
We're doing good.
Yeah, I echo everything you say. The creature effects in this one are particularly lively and animated. There's the design, the suitmation is really good. I love Godzilla's white demon eyes. I love that he's sort of the unstoppable force that these guardian monsters just every time they seem to get an advantage on him or a one up on him, he just kind of unlocks more power and kicks it to the next level and just owns them and decimates them. Mothra takes a hell of a beating in this movie, which is something that I absolutely love. Like, I love Mothra, but she's the Kenny from South Park. She's that for the Godzilla franchise. Like, she's made to be sort of abused and murdered. So, it's always good when a movie does that. And just great monster battles, great effects, an awesome score. The musical score for this is just like, it's got these electronic aspects to it. It's got this mystical aspect to it. Just great stuff. And there's not much more to be said. This is an excellent film, just outside of the top 10, but fully deserving of being in there as well. It's excellent.
All right, Chris. Do you want to lead us off on our top 10?
All right, I suppose.
Can I talk you into it?
Sure. We'll switch it over. So I'll go number 10. Maybe a little bit controversial, I don't know, but at my number 10 spot, I actually have Godzilla 2014. And I echo all of the criticisms with this movie. You know, I don't like that it lacks the actual classic Godzilla theme. I don't like all of the cutting away. I don't like that the movie's a little on the dark side. And yes, I have the 4K disc. I watch on an OLED TV in a dark room. It's still a little bit of a dark movie. Uh, I like the human cast. The human characters are a little on the dry side. The cast is all great. Once Cranston's out of the movie, it kind of the energy level kind of goes down in the room. But it's so it treats Godzilla as such a cinematic event. You know, there's not a ton of great Godzilla screen time, but the reveals and the build up is exceptionally well done. The movie is a little bit too much build up, but it is very, very well handled, and it just kind of sets this stage of kind of like you're in awe of these giant creatures in this world, and it has its own fair doses of thrills. I will never ever ever forget being in the IMAX theater, and you know, you're deep into the movie, and then you see the blue light up on Aaron Taylor Johnson's face, and everyone slowly realizing that Godzilla's charging up his breath. That's an iconic moment for me in just cinema history for me personally. So, you know, a lot to nitpick and whine about with this movie, sure, but also in terms of impact and how important it is for the Godzilla franchise, for the Monsterverse. The things it does right far outweigh the things it does wrong. And it was just as Godzilla 98 was the exact opposite of the Godzilla movie we needed at that time. This is the Godzilla movie we needed at this time in 2014, and it delivers.
It absolutely does. I am glad that cracked your top 10 as it was just outside for me, but still, again, an awesome film. My number 10 is Mothra vs. Godzilla from 1964. And the Godzilla design in this film is one of my all-time favorites. And then, like I said, always a pleasure to see Mothra. I watched this one quite a bit when I was younger. Of course, I would always just skip to the fight scenes and whatnot. But I like the characters. I like the plot of this film. And I just sit down and I can have fun with it. You know, I seen this one at G Fest as well this past year in 2024. And G Fest, the films they brought were this year were just awesome. And seeing this on the big screen, along with the 74 Mecha Godzilla and a couple others, it was just fun. This film has pretty much always been in my top 10, and I don't think it's ever gonna leave unless we get a phenomenal Godzilla film coming up. But it is stuck in the 10 spot for me as in Mothra vs. Godzilla. This is a fun film. I absolutely enjoy it.
Nice, very well said. Yeah, it deserves all the respect in the world. You know, we're on that younger side, so I'll fully admit that I'm more of a have more of a preference and bias towards the more recent films, but I always like to give the love to the Showa films when I can. Uh, my number 9 entry is Godzilla versus Biollante. Uh, I think it's sort of the evolution of Return to Godzilla into just that pure 80s vibes. You know, the opening track of Bio Wars is forever iconic. Biollante is an excellently designed kaiju, both in concept and in design and in the effects execution of that design. Both of them, both the rose form and the more, you know, monstrous form. This film still feels, you know, I've said it before, but Godzilla versus Biollante feels like the last time for a long time where the effects and the creatures and the cinematography and the production value still felt equivalent to, you know, just about any Hollywood genre movie you could pick out at that time. It didn't feel, you know, the dawn of CGI wasn't there yet, that led to Godzilla movies being left in the dust for a long time. You know, so this one still feels, you know, and it's got a great energy to it. It's got like a script that moves. You know, it's got a good pace. I love the characters in it. They're all sort of compelling and interesting. You know, when Godzilla, you know, there's some iconic moments like all of the students who show what they dreamed of, and then you get they're all pictures of Godzilla, and it's timed with the music and Godzilla emerging from the volcano. There's just some excellent like all timer Godzilla moments in here. The introduction of Mickey Sagusa and so I love Godzilla versus Biollante.
Absolutely. And I'm doing some adding and subtracting here of what movies are left on mine, and I'm like, oh, Chris has not said a lot of these, so coming up, we might be matching here or one off. You're 6, my 5, you're 2,
Mm-hmm.
my 4. We're gonna have some good conversation left.
Indeed, I'm glad you're keeping track. I haven't really been.
I just know what ones that are left on my list that you haven't said, so I'm excited for that.
I got
But
you. Yeah, I'm rolling with the punches over here.
yep, in my number 9 spot, I have Invasion of Astro Monster, and
Oof, awful, bad. Get out of here. You're canceled again.
I absolutely have a blast with the Exilians. And, it's crazy because this is the film in the franchise where we get the least amount of screen time of Godzilla in all 38 films. It's like 5 minutes and change, I think we said on our episode for this film. And it just, that absolutely shocked me that I liked this film so much, but I like the characters.
That might have been the least shocking trivia about this movie to me personally.
Well, for how much I liked it, it was like, wow, like a film I like this much literally has Godzilla in like 7% of the film. But I like the characters of Glenn, and like I like their travel to Planet X and meeting the Exilians, and then like I like how at first they seem to trust the Exilians, and they're like, are we putting too much faith in them? And I like the whole, out of like everything, this is my favorite alien plot in the Godzilla franchise. And it's fun to me. I like the Exilians, I like the characters, I like Godzilla, Rodan, and King Ghidorah in this film. And it's one of my favorite of the Showa era, and it's up here in my number 9 spot.
Yeah, I mean, never hurts to have Kumi Mizuno in the movie either.
Not at all. Not at all.
All right, so my number 8 spot is Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. This is a wild one. It's new. It's brand new, but it has a lot of visual storytelling, a lot of focus on the creatures, maybe a little too much focus on Kong as opposed to Godzilla for it to be a high ranking Godzilla movie. But for every bit that Godzilla is on screen, he's killing it. He's awesome. He's taking names. He's powering up. He gets plenty of time to shine. He's kind of the secret weapon of the movie that allows them to win in the end. It's fast paced. It's got great visual effects, great creature designs. It's really leans into that wild, over the top sort of fantasy adventure aspect of the giant monster genre, and we're fully out of the realm of monsters just wreaking havoc in cities. Like, this is playing in all new territory, and I really like that.
Absolutely. My number 8 is Godzilla 2000, and I seen this in theaters when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I had a blast back then. I absolutely enjoy it every time I watch it now, after coming from the 98 Godzilla and seeing that to this new and fresh and upgraded design of Godzilla with, the large dorsal plates, and everything on him looks sharp, from his teeth to like parts of his skin look like pointy and kind of slick, and then you get Orga as a monster. I thoroughly enjoy this film every time I watch it, and it's guaranteed I probably watch this at least once or twice a year, and I have fun with it. This is an awesome Godzilla film. The trailer and the marketing for it over here was great, and I just have fun. I can sit down, turn it on, and just pay attention to the screen and have a blast when Godzilla shows up. And they have the Godzilla like chasers, kind of like storm chasers, and it's just all in all a good movie, and I have it in my number 8 spot.
Well said. I have Godzilla 2000 in my number 7 spot. So great timing. Likewise, I saw this movie in theaters. Was the first Toho Godzilla movie I got to see in theaters. I love the American edit of this movie. It is unequivocally a huge improvement on the Japanese cut. It might be the one film where I would argue very, very strongly that the Japanese cut is actually not all that great, but the American cut is. The dubbing, it has great energy to it. The edits they make to improve the pacing are all for the better. Some of the musical additions they make give the film a more cinematic feel. The sound design is totally like overhauled and is just beefy and strong and powerful. So the American cut of this, like, it doesn't really change a lot, but the stuff it changes just gives it that extra 10, 15, 20% of awesomeness. And yeah, I'll never forget some of the highlights of this movie with Godzilla charging up his breath and battling the UFO, battling Orga in the city. You know, it holds a special place for me, and it actually, you know, I when I pop it in, it holds up. It's like, no, this is still really fun and really charming and really endearing, and it really kind of works. And I think they kind of nailed the tone, and so I'll always love Godzilla 2000.
Absolutely. So we switched spots here because in my number 7 spot, I have Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. And
Okay, okay.
it might be biased because it's new, but since I seen it twice in theaters, and I've probably watched it another 4 or 5 times this year, with friends or family or something like that. People who wanted to were like, "Oh, I haven't seen it yet," and I'm like, "Hell, let's turn it on." So I love that they brought back the characters. Dr. Andrews, Gia, Trapper as a new character. They brought back Brian Tyree as Bernie Hayes, and Godzilla as his evolved, upgraded design. I absolutely am a sucker for it. In the trailers, I didn't think I was gonna be, but in the film, how they used it and how they showed him like the reasons for him powering up and how he did it, absolutely enjoyed it. Kong is awesome. Getting to explore more of the Hollow Earth was fantastic. As we got like another whole another army and family of apes, and like some new like dog creatures in the beginning, like dog wolf creatures that were trying to attack Kong, and they brought Doug back for a little cameo. And it I feel like the director just really went out and had fun with this film, and it works. So that's why Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is in my number 7 spot.
Excellent. Very well said. My number 6 spot goes to Godzilla versus Kong. Uh, it's not as full-fledged of a Godzilla movie, so while on a scale of, say, just the Monsterverse movies, this one would probably be my favorite, but on a scale of Godzilla movies, this one gets number 6. And for me, it's just so much like wish fulfillment. I wanted a remake of King Kong versus Godzilla since I was a kid, and I also selfishly wanted Godzilla to win. So to be an adult and get Godzilla versus Kong, and Godzilla is kind of just wrecking shop and dominating Kong almost the entire time. Kong needs a weapon just to give him some difficulties, but it's very much sort of the Godzilla show. It was very nice to see. Very nice to see Godzilla get the definitive win over Kong. It was just so rewarding. Just took me back to being a little kid. Just hoping and wishing that I could see that one day. And I saw it was the first movie back from the lockdowns that I saw in a theater. It was sold out, meaning that for 50% capacity, it was sold out because of the restrictions. Saw it with my younger brother. It was like being at a concert. There was a very, very invested crowd. One of my all-time favorite theater experiences. And so, I just think this movie, people say this and that about, oh, the characters aren't so this, characters aren't so that. For me, this movie just sings and moves at a great pace and delivers the goods. And I just think it's a monster piece.
I a million percent, when we started this, thought that would be in your top 5 for sure, but just
outside of it. Just outside of it.
That's all right. My number 6 is one you already talked about, and Godzilla vs. Biollante. And this is a film that, as a Godzilla fan, if you don't like this film, what is wrong with you? I mean, Biollante is phenomenal as a creature design. We get in what I think is one of the most iconic Godzilla looks, coming from '84, he's been in the volcano for a little while, so he's you could say evolved again in this film, and like we get his grand re-entrance to the franchise when he comes out of the volcano, and the characters aren't bad in this whatsoever, but I'm coming to this for the monster fights. I like that they brought back the Super X, and as a kid, like watching this again, like I always skip to the monster fights and whatnot. And there's not a lot of Godzilla in this, but what we do get of him, like battling the JSDF in the rain and getting electrocuted to raise his temperature and whatnot, like this is phenomenal Godzilla entertainment, and clearly why out of 38 films, it's in my top 10 at my number 6 spot.
Very nice. My number 5 spot goes to Godzilla vs. Destroya, 1995. This is the finale of the Heisei series, and for me, it's my favorite. Uh, it has this great vibe of being this almost not just a giant monster movie, but almost this sort of ticking clock disaster movie in the way of like Armageddon or Deep Impact or something, where it's like it's almost like this countdown kind of a movie with Godzilla's rising temperature and his impending meltdown. And so it's that wrapped in with this, destroyer element, which kind of brings it full circle back to the Oxygen Destroyer with the 54 film. It always felt like I had so much tension when I watched it as a kid, and it was one of the first times where I found myself getting very emotional over the giant monsters, when you see what happens to Junior and then you see what happens to Godzilla. And I think, Akira Ifukube wrote the track Requiem, which is set to Godzilla's death in this film. And he said he wrote it as if he was composing the track for his own death. And it's just one of the most sort of sad and tragic kind of moments in the history of the franchise, and it's just iconic and memorable. And so I don't, there's not a version of reality where I can have this outside of my top 5 Godzilla movies. It cuts too deep for me, so it gets my number 5 spot with gusto.
Absolutely a phenomenal film. My number 5 is one you just mentioned, Godzilla vs. Kong. So I seen this one in theaters as well, and Chris told me a story where he was working at the theater, and he was actually kind of like doing, I don't know if you said you were doing like a little walkthrough and you seen the trailer was going, and a guy was just amazed that there was a new Godzilla vs. Kong coming out. And I love that story because it's exactly how I'm sure everyone who's a Godzilla or a Kong fan felt. It's like, what? Like they're actually doing this? Like, we've heard stories about it, but there's just so many good monster action scenes in this. We get Mecha Godzilla back in an awesome fashion, just putting a beating on Godzilla, and Kong has to like help him and save the day together. And like you said, Chris, making Godzilla the triumphant and clear winner. He stomps his foot on Kong's chest and kind of like, and in that moment, like he can either end him or he can be like, look, dude, there's a bigger like evil out there, like stay the hell out of my way or you're gonna die, pretty much. And that's like my favorite scene of the film is their Hong Kong battle. And everything about this is, even though it's more of a Kong centered film, when it comes to Godzilla vs. Kong, if you can't have fun with this or enjoy this, like you're doing something wrong with your life, because this is a knock 'em sock 'em. Like this film goes all out with the monsters and like finding and exploring Hollow Earth, and this is just an absolute blast. And I don't think I could have this outside my top 5, and that's where I have it, is my number 5 spot.
Very well said. Moving on to my number 4, a big discrepancy between you and I. I have 2016 Shin Godzilla as my number 4. I understand the criticisms that it's a little dialogue heavy, the characters are a little dry, but I love it for being about the sort of, it almost feels like it's this sort of objective step back of how the government would handle an actual Godzilla attack in the modern world. So it's not concerned with getting involved in the minutia of the character drama, and so that can make it feel a little stilted. But it gives it this sort of like documentarian kind of vibe, like you're just sitting in and witnessing it as it would be happening, as it is unfolding, and that's a different kind of compelling. It's different. I understand, but I really like it because it makes everything just feel so raw and real. And I love the multiple stages that Godzilla has in this film. I love that the soundtrack is loaded with classic themes, but I also think that it has some epic additions to the musical pantheon of Godzilla with things like Persecution of the Masses and Who Will Know. Godzilla's first use of his atomic breath in this film is a cinematic moment that's just one of the greatest of the franchise for me. And seeing Godzilla brought to life by Toho with CGI that looks incredibly good in some cases. I loved it. And there's this whole sort of middle section of the movie where it's the military versus Godzilla, and they use the choppers on him, then they use the tanks on him, then they're dropping bombs on him, and then America comes in, and then it climaxes with him unleashing his breath, and it's just this like 20-minute sequence that's pure Godzilla. So you call it recency bias, but Shin Godzilla is one of the cream of the crop. I'm a serious Godzilla guy, and so I rate this one very, very highly.
I cannot fault you whatsoever, because the first time I seen that, I had it ranked in my top 10, and it's just the more I watch it, I love everything about Godzilla in it. And then it's just some of the characters drag it down for me, but I can still definitely put it on and have a good time knowing that it's one of the more serious Godzilla films that we've gotten.
Yeah, and I've got to say that the female lead in the film, I think her name is Satomi Ishihara, is absolutely gorgeous, and that never hurts either.
Not one bit. All right, so that was number 4 for you. My number 4, Chris is not going to agree with me here, is Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah from 1991.
Pull the knife out of my back.
I absolutely love the King Ghidorah design in there.
You rated it high to compensate. You knew I was gonna have it low, so you were like, I gotta put it like 5 spots higher than it deserves.
I just absolutely have loved this film since I was a kid. It's one of the ones I always go back to and turn on when I'm bored or I got nothing to do, and I'm like, hey, you know what? We're gonna pop in a Godzilla movie. I pop this one on. I love the Godzilla design. I love his roar in this. I love the reintroduction of King Ghidorah. I am not a fan myself of the time travel or the space travel, but I can kind of ignore that for having 2 of my favorite Godzilla monsters, and including himself of all time in the franchise in this film. And the fight scenes we get with them are great. And some of the characters like Terasawa and stuff like that I absolutely have a blast with this film. And I know this is the one that probably the one me and Chris differ on the most in the franchise, but we're looking at it from 2 different sides. He's got it a little lower. I have it in my number 4 spot, as I absolutely enjoy this film.
Fair enough. And it's good to have that counterbalance. My number 3 spot goes to 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters. It is just one of those things where, again, whereas if like I said, if I'm just ranking the Monsterverse movies, I'd probably put Godzilla vs. Kong over it. But if I'm judging Godzilla movies, this movie tries far too hard and ticks way too many boxes for me as a Godzilla fan to not put this very high on the list. From the classic music, getting the fact that we have one Hollywood Godzilla movie where we get the proper Godzilla music is a crime, but we get it in this movie, and we get 1.5 million references and connections to all of the various lore and past of the history of the character. And he gets his crown jewels of the monster roster here with Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah. This is in essence almost a remake of Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster, in that sense. Ghidorah is basically literally Satan in this movie. And the Bear McCreary's musical score is amazing. The cinematography is fantastic. I love the pace. I love the action. I love the spectacle. I think it's a great cast. Kyle Chandler's a great lead. I like Millie Bobby Brown, Vera Farmiga. I just think it's all really well balanced. I feel like the world missed the boat when this movie didn't make like $1 billion. I was like, I don't get it, but I love it to death. I just cannot sing the praises of this high enough. It's called Godzilla King of the Monsters. It literally ends with other monsters bowing to Godzilla as their king. And then you go right into a cover of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla. Like, it's just front to back. This thing is just like stacked top to bottom with pure love of Godzilla and Godzilla DNA. And I just, it's my top 3.
Absolutely. I knew that one was coming up for you, and I absolutely loved that it was this high. I don't think my top 3 films will ever change unless we get an absolute banger of a Godzilla film, because at number 3, I have Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. And
okay,
like you were talking about Ghidorah being Satan and King of the Monsters. Well, we pretty much get Satan in this film with Destoroyah. And I absolutely love Godzilla's design. I like that in this ending to the Heisei era, like we get this like all powerful monster who even a like fully supercharged Godzilla is struggling to fight and battle with. We get Miki Sagusa in her most like prominent role in the Heisei era, and it's all in all a good time. Like everything you said about it, I agree with. We got Godzilla as like a ticking time bomb. Akira Ifukube delivers an absolute phenomenal soundtrack and score for this film. And even, the ending credits showing like the collage, like skip through of all the Godzilla and the Heisei films and stuff like that. There's so much to like about this film. And I've seen fans that don't like it, and I just don't understand, because it's such a good Godzilla design. The characters, we're going with the monsters the whole movie through, and it's just I've loved this film ever since I seen it when I was younger. I got the VH copy of this for Christmas, and I wore that thing out, and it's in my number 3 spot for a reason. I absolutely love this film.
Very well said. Very well said. My number 2 is going to be Godzilla 1954. And I'll take the twofer because it was Americanized as Godzilla King of the Monsters in 1956. I think both films are exceptional. Obviously, the 54 is the iconic classic. It holds up. It's old and it's dated and black and white and this and that. Sure. But it is so timeless and so just perfect and iconic in what it is. Like, I think it really is a masterpiece. As a kid, I could never stand to watch King of the Monsters because it was in black and white, and it just was it was boring. It was this and that, but the 54 version of the film is it's just so well handled. It's so serious. It carries so much weight, and it's just laying down the iconography of the franchise. The very first thing you hear is the footsteps and the roar before you even see a frame of footage. The Godzilla design. There's nothing more that needs to be said. And then and being able to appreciate the original cut has only made me also appreciate the Americanized version. I think both of them are classics in their own ways, and so the fact that this movie can exist in 2 different versions and they're both kind of iconic and classic and were both wildly successful, I think that speaks a lot to the power of the core story at hand here, and the the nuclear allegory and the timeliness of that. Like Akira Ifukube laying down the themes that would stand the test of 70 years. There's just not enough that could be said. So it's my number 2 all time.
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot argue with you one little bit. Most Godzilla fans would agree with you on that one over where I put it. But when it comes to my number 2 and my number 1, I'll go first. I'll save your number 1 for last.
All right.
In the number 2 spot, I have Godzilla Minus One, and this is it's such a perfect Godzilla film. I've never had a Godzilla film really actually make me care about the characters as strongly as I did in this one with Noriko and Shikishima and even like Tachibana and Sumiko. It's just there's so much to love about this. I think this is an absolute G tier Godzilla design. I've seen some hate on Godzilla sites for this film, and I don't get it. I mean, this film made me tear up in theaters twice. And I mean, I'm not an emotional person, but I was invested in the characters, I was invested in the story, and it is just a perfect Godzilla film. But it is my number 2. In my number 1 spot, I have 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters. And this is just purely off enjoyability. I absolutely love having the updated designs of Mothra, King Ghidorah, Rodan, and then the updated Godzilla that we get in this film from the 2014. I love the characters in this film. We crack some jokes. We get Sarazawa's sacrifice to kind of revive or re-heal Godzilla after he's hit with the oxygen destroyer while fighting Ghidorah. We get the Boston fight scene with King Ghidorah where King Ghidorah drops him from who knows how high in the sky and Mothra sacrifices herself for him. We get burning or fire Godzilla at the end, when he's fully nuked out and charged. And Godzilla King of the Monsters is just a fan praise. Like it's a love letter to the fans, and I absolutely love it. I watch it easily probably 5 times a year or more, and that is in my number 1 spot out of 38 for my Godzilla franchise ranking.
Very nice, very nice, very, very good appraisal of the film from you. Anyone can figure it out by now. I have in my number 1 spot Godzilla Minus One. Again, call it recency bias. That's fine for me. Godzilla Minus One is cinema. It's the kind of Godzilla movie where they don't all get to be like this. Nor should all of them have to be like this. They don't all have to be a serious movie. They don't all have to aspire to the same kind of things. They can be fun and they can be serious, but this is one of those movies where you watch it and it was like, I didn't know Godzilla movies were allowed to be this good. Or I didn't know they were allowed to be this good for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It's you see a movie like Top Gun Maverick take the world by storm, and then you think like, oh, there's legitimately going to be a Godzilla movie that is on this level of heroism and emotional engagement, and you're gonna tear up about characters in this Godzilla movie, and you're gonna be hanging on the edge of your seat rooting for this character to make it or to change their mind about this or to go through with that. And Godzilla's going to terrify you because of what you think he's going to do to the main characters, and because of how well realized his destructive nature is. And we get a Toho Godzilla movie where he's rendered with CGI, and it's putting Hollywood films to shame that cost 10, 20 times more than this movie. Godzilla for his 70th anniversary got to win the best visual effects Oscar. That's such a crowning achievement for a franchise that was always built and lived off of the special effects and the visual effects. And so for a film to be, the spectacle is so amazing, and the characters and the drama and the acting is so powerful. It's this ultimate combination of, it's almost, calling it a blockbuster almost feels like a disservice to the movie. Like, this is just a great film. I have to imagine that it's like seeing The Dark Knight compared to some of the other Batman movies. That sort of, I didn't know it was allowed to be this good, and so I'll always appreciate Godzilla Minus One for being the new film that kind of legitimized Godzilla in the eyes of millions of people around the world. So, this one gets to be my top number 1, my favorite.
Absolutely. And I almost put that as my number 1. I've seen it in theaters twice, and I've probably watched it 10 times since then. It's one of those films that I can put on while any mood I'm in. I can put it on, sit down, relax, do some research for upcoming podcast episodes that we have and just have it on in the background and watch it, and or just pay attention fully to it. Godzilla Minus One is, I mean, if it's outside your top 5, I will ask what is wrong with you, because this is a top-notch Godzilla film. All in all, one of the best for sure.
Yeah, could not have said it better.
So, Chris, something I tortured you with, let's say, for 36 weeks of the year. We have done it.
I lobbied so hard. I was like, can't we do like 4 different videos and break the arrows all up, or 5 different videos and just do on each? I'm like, that's a lot easier. That's a lot simpler. You're like, no, we're doing them all. And so this was fun. This was a one of a kind. There's no other franchise with this many entries, really, that anyone gets a chance to do this. So, it was a unique experience and a whole lot of fun.
Just know that I will never make you do this many again. I will never make you do a Marvel countdown or anything like that.
Oh, really? We're not going to rank all of the James Bond movies or anything like that?
This was hard enough.
No, we're not. Spoiler alert, we're not.
All right, I appreciate you to the fullest for helping me out with this one and giving me all 38. I know it was hard. I could still probably switch some of these 14 to 13, 17 to 18, but these for now are my definitive rankings. I'm sure they could change with another Godzilla coming out here in a couple years. We'll have to see what happens with that one.
Yeah, that'd be fun. It'd be fun to go through again and listen to it and see how close we were on some of the films and how many of them fell in the same spots and how many of them were in borderline opposite spots. It was a lot of fun to see where it was similar and where it was dissimilar.
Absolutely. So, thank you for joining me, though. This was I've been wanting to do a ranking list of these for a long time, and I finally got it done, and I couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, I've never ranked all of the films in the series before. I was always very hard nosed of like, well, you can't compare the Millennium movies to the Showa movies. It's not fair. It's not really proper. It's different things. And for this, I'm like, you can't just throw them all into a pot and rank them. I was always adamant about that, but we did it this one time, and I'll relook at the list and completely change all of them for next week.
That is all right. But later on this week, we will actually be moving on to our next franchise. Friday is Friday the 13th, and we will be releasing our first episode of the Friday the 13th franchise. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And then we will continue on with that franchise as well, which is going to be a blast to continue that one. So I can't wait for us to keep going into that one as well.
Are we going to start dropping all of them on Fridays after that to keep with the trend?
No.
Oh, just that one.
Just that one, because it's Friday the 13th.
I thought I had the game change here, and nope, not at all.
So we'll release one Friday, and then we will continue with the Monday releases. So so you'll get 3 episodes within a week span. You'll get our Godzilla ranking. You'll get Friday the 13th. The original on Friday the 13th, and you'll get Friday the 13th Part 2 on Monday the 16th of September. So you'll get 3 episodes from us within a week. So we're kicking ass and taking names here.
Excellent.
All right, Chris. So now that we got that finished, I will say thank you again. We will get out of here, and like I said, we will start the Friday the 13th franchise on Friday. So until next time.